I'm Zhao the Artist, an independent animator and filmmaker, and today we're going to be diving into file organization, which is all about creating a system in which your computer files are organized. This can be done in many ways and applied to just about anything, but what I'm interested in is how file organization relates to filmmaking and why it's important for people who want to tell stories with their animations to do it. Whether it's pre-production instructions on how to draw something or just a lot of different files for the animation itself, during the process of creating an animated film, many files are produced. With all that in mind, it's important to have some sort of system to manage all that stuff. After all, the more time you spend getting lost looking for files on your hard drive, the less time you spend actually making your film, which is bad. It's also worth noting if you decide to hire on help or maybe ask a few of your friends to work with you on an animated project, you will need an organized system to communicate with those other people. So that's another point for being organized. Okay, cool, brilliant. Having a system to organize all the files in my film is important, but how do we actually go about doing it? Well, I can offer how I personally am organizing everything for the short film I am currently making. Then I will give you some further suggested reading, so to speak, so you can build your own system. I say so to speak because all the suggested reading is actually just videos and live streams that I found. The way I approached the folders and organizing the various elements of my film is as follows. First, I have a shot list folder, which contains all of the animation files for the film in order of the scenes. Then I have a spreadsheet, which actually describes what each scene is and what's happening. That way I can sort through all this. Then I have a reference folder, which has stuff like character turnarounds, concept art, mood boards for each character, and just basically anything that needs to be referenced during the animation process while I'm actually drawing. Then I have a folder for the animatic, which is basically very rough storyboards timed out. Then I have the actual folder for storyboards, which is the non-timed out version. Again, this is sort of getting into pre-production or planning. These aren't final, but they have their own space. I have a folder for audio. This contains everything from placeholder sound effects that I used in the animatic, as well as voice lines for each character that talks in the film. Next is backgrounds. This is just literally the Clip Studio files and the PNGs for every single painting that is in the film, as well as a few warm-ups that I did just before painting the final backgrounds. Lastly, I have a video resources, which is basically just for me because I'm making YouTube videos about this. This is stuff like speed paints, work in progress screenshots, basically any material that I'm going to then later put into a YouTube video. Ends up here. Since each piece of the project has its own folder, and by extension its own space, it means I don't have to comb through a mess of different files when I eventually have to put all of said pieces together. In short, in the shot list folder, in addition to the animation files themselves, which are organized by scene, I have a spreadsheet which acts as a guide or roadmap for said files. This would be the actual shot list. Here I have each scene numbered with a single sentence description of what is taking place in that scene, as well as what the project files within that scene are named. This is really nice to have, and I would deem it essential to anyone who wants to make a full film, since you can see your entire project at a glance, and you can easily tell what is finished and what still needs to be worked on. And the nice part is you can do this without having to open up the individual project files, which is just unnecessarily tedious. Alright, awesome. That's great and all for organizing the many parts of a film, but what about within the individual files? Good question! Now, in my opinion, when it comes to file organization for your personal art, you can do just about whatever, as long as everything is labeled clearly in a way that makes sense to you and anyone you are working with. That said, I'll give a few examples of systems I've either come across or personally have used for organizing visual art. I often label things by what object they are. So for example here, Josh's hoodie gets its own layer because it's a hoodie, which is separate from the other clothes he's wearing and from the character's skin. This allows for a lot of freedom in making changes down the line of individual elements of a character, but it can become a bit tedious if you have a lot of different moving parts to your subject, so do with that information what you will. White Manga has been on record to say that he sometimes labels things by color, so for example all the red in a picture would be on the red layer, blues on the blue layer, etc., etc. You can also go for the Japanese anime production approach, which is to label each layer alphabetically and only make a new layer when the project demands it. So regardless of subject, you know the bottom layer is always A, the one in front of that is B, so forth and so on. So far as further reading is concerned, I'll link the SakugaFoundry live streams in the description. They have a ton of info on the anime production pipeline, which is one of the few recent examples of a production pipeline which is pretty thoroughly documented at this point for like just anyone to see. Do note though that the Japanese pipeline is sort of optimized for working on paper as well as working with an entire studio with multiple departments, which is likely not the environment you are making animations in, especially if you're a small independent artist. So keep that in mind if you want to adapt any of that pipeline to your own workflow. Always take into account why the system was in place before you copy it. Please. I also will link some videos on just general file management to get you started with some ideas on how to potentially manage your project. They were very helpful for me, so maybe they will be helpful for you too. Lastly, I'll throw a download to LibreOffice, which is just a free open source alternative to Microsoft Excel. That should be just about everything I have to say at time of recording. Thank you for watching, and I hope this was helpful to anyone who might want to take the leap and stitch together a few animated shots to tell a larger story.